Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Rao. Uh, I just wanted to begin with saying that we are all facing some very significant challenges with respect to managing people these days, and I am reminded of what's known as Einstein's theory of insanity, because a lot of us just end up trying to do the same things again and again, and trying to achieve different results with the people that we manage. And that's what Einstein's theory, he defines insanity as doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. So we've got to do something different. And that's what today's topic is about. How can managers work a little differently with their people to achieve results that are better than the ones that we're getting today. Before I get into the core of the subject, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the company I represent. We call it Strat to Results. The Strat stands for strategy, and the results obviously is all the work that we try to put in with our clients to help them achieve the results that they want to achieve by defining the strategy that they have created for themselves. In our work over the last 5 years or 6 years, maybe we found that most of the work that we did was on sales operations, and so that's the reason why you see in the framework of what we do, sales excellence is at the top of at the top of the pile, right on the roof of the house, which in turn has two key parts. One is sales operations. A lot of people think sales excellence means having an excellent sales team, and so spend a lot of time and effort and resources in creating excellent sales teams. There's nothing wrong with that, except that the challenge is if you've got a sales team that performs beautifully because they're at a certain level of expertise, the next year you want to achieve, say, 25 or 30% increase in sales. How are you going to make them run harder than what they already are doing right now? Right? You can probably train them a little bit. That will take them a little step forward. You can use some methodology which might take them a further step forward. But year after year, when you have to do this, one of the core things that needs to supplement the skills of the sales team is a very solid sales operation. And we've developed expertise in that area. Once the sales operation is done, which is essentially four parts, about understanding the market and segmenting that market, building revenue maps for that, building go-to markets, how you're going to take that strategy to the market, comes the second important part, which is how do you execute and against the sales model. So that's the second part that we focus on. In the bargain, sometimes we have to do some skills development as well, mostly in the client organizations that we work with. And these are mostly around how do you create more value for a customer, because most of the time, most of us work in industries and we sell products and services that are getting increasingly commoditized. And so the only differentiator is price. But you cannot continue to win on price. It's not sustainable. Somebody is going to show up with a cheaper product or a service. So how do you create value for a customer? The second is the second place where people leave a lot of money is in not negotiating strategically. A traditional negotiation that people will normally do, or salespeople normally do, is, well, there's a price I've quoted, there's a discount that the customer is asking for, we'll settle somewhere in between. That's not nearly half as strategic as you could be. For example, if you're in a stronger position to negotiate, do you even know it? So those are that's one of the areas that we work in. And then we found that when we get into the execution mode, very often, at the front line of management, there are challenges with people in understanding how they should manage their teams. So we work a little bit on management fundamentals and on leadership initiatives. Our objective is not to create linear results. We know that the market and the expertise that organizations have within themselves are doing that anyway. Our objective is, can we bring in some methods or some processes or some expertise by which we can drive non-linear results. I'm just taking a few examples here. One of the clients that we worked with in industrial automation had a challenge because of the way the manufacturing industry has been in the last 4 or 5 years, and they were really in a difficult situation, because being a global company, there was also a lot of pressure from the global parent saying that, with China slowing down, India has to make up for the shortfall in that space, especially because we keep talking about recovery in the economy and reforms and make in India and things like that. So we've been working with them now for 3 years, and we've been able to show them some pretty simply non-linear results. They've been growing 2x of market growth over the last 3 years, in spite of the market being what it is. We also work with in fact, the largest European manufacturing company on a complete overhaul of the culture of the organization, which had become extremely internally focused. They measure their customer satisfaction, if you might call it, or customer loyalty, by using a Net Promoter Score survey every year. When they started 3 years ago, they got a score of 19, and we worked with them for about 2.5 years. Of course, there is a lot of other things too. What we did was not the only thing that was done. But certainly it was a significant part, and we were able to grow the Net Promoter Score from 19 to 57 in 3 years, which is pretty good. It's a third example of a manufacturing company in the auto ancillary space where we were able to make them very relevant in their global scheme of things. There are 5 plants across the world. India's plant was the smallest, least profitable, and had the biggest quality issues that that existed in their plants across the planet. So they engaged us, and we were able to get them to a point of viability where the business was generating at least the global norm of profitability in their 4 walls profit, which went up from 14 to 20% in the first year. So that's just a quick overview of the kind of work that we do. I just want to get into the core subject now, and that is, leadership is, as we grow into positions of leadership, or as we grow as individuals into positions of managing people, there is certain timestamp on the skills and the methodologies that we have grown up with. Unfortunately, it's a timestamp, and it cannot remain a time warp. You cannot remain in a say a style that you adopted and using which you thrived in the 1980s and still be successful with it in 2017. And but unfortunately, the point of reference we have for for success is exactly the blueprint that worked for us in the past, but may or may not in the present or in the future. One of those challenges is how do you manage people, in a way in which you don't exercise a great deal of control over them. We see this around us all over. I mean, those of you who have children probably understand this more than those who don't. But the fact is that the day and age of command and control over people is well and truly in the past. And it used to be a system where, for example, you had a position of power which you had earned through your performance and your hard work, and so you exercised that position of power with your staff to get them to do what had to be done. A lot of people still use this technique. I'm not saying it doesn't work at all. It's just that the returns are diminishing. And the reason for that is that cultures around the world, and definitely so in India, because of the proliferation of information and the modernization, if you may call it that, of the education system and so on, has been such that there is an accent on independent thinking. The older systems, like for instance, when I went to work for the first time, I didn't really choose so much, which company I would go to or what role I would do. If a job came along, I took it, and then worked my way up through it. And over a period of years, I changed that. But if you look at youngsters today, you can have the best companies in the world going and offering them jobs, but they want to go and work for a startup where there is no guarantee of just about anything. And these are not kids who don't have a choice. These are kids who've gone to the best engineering schools and management schools. And I've often wondered why. And the reason for that is that these people have grown up in an environment And increasingly, a lot of people in the middle of the, in the middle of the pyramid in an organization have also been exposed to exactly those kinds of, attitudes that this younger lot is. They're looking for something that looks like this. How do we, how do we get empowered to drive our own results? How do we somehow remain in a system that gives us the flexibility to be creative? How do we remain in a system that gives us the flexibility to have a say in what we do and have a contribution, and a very distinct and clearly identifiable contribution to the success of the business that we're in? Now, this is the challenge we are facing because, most of the managers, I would say, or a very large number of managers have experienced this position and power, command and control kind of system, and are trying to manage people who are looking at development and empowerment based environments, and that's a bit of a disconnect. And that's why we say that perhaps a top-down approach isn't always going to give you the results that you want. In fact, increasingly it will give you less and less outcome than alternate means of managing people. One of those means, and a powerful and proven means of doing that, is called coaching. It's important to understand why coaching is required. Aside from the way that people are approaching their workplace, is the other issue of the disruptive nature of many of the things that we see around us. One of the most obvious disruptive forces in our lives has been technology. It has changed the way people behave. It has changed the way people shop. It's changed the way people travel. It's changed the way people eat. It has changed just about every form of decision making as we know it in in our lives. And we are even getting to a point where we find in some of the work that we do very interesting thing. In, say, for instance, the curriculum for engineering, say mechanical engineering. There's more and more commoditization and standardization in component manufacture, and the differentiation that a lot of people are putting into machinery, say a finished product like an automobile, has to do with principles that were not hitherto known in the manufacturing industry space. For example, in the mechanical manufacturing space, mechanical engineering space, and that is the use of software and technology to control large components or large functioning of finished products. And so, we find that this change is occurring in just about every space in our lives. Now, when that rate of change is so rapid, you're going to have people around you that can turn around with that, at that kind of a speed. In the technology industry, there's a well-known term. It's called, you can make this company turn on a dime. A dime is a very small coin, a very small denomination coin of US currency. So they talk about, how do you make a company turn on a dime? Unfortunately, it's not just technology industry related anymore. It's creeping up into every part of our lives. And so managers who are dealing with these teams need to create both the capability in their organizations as well as the capacity in their organizations, and have people around them, that can increasingly take ownership of situations or positions that nobody in the system has experienced before, and then be able to drive from that level of uncertainty to success in a relatively fast period of time. It's impossible for an individual to do this. You just need to have many more people around you to be able to drive this. And all this is happening for a variety of reasons. I mean, there are disrupting forces in industry, sure, but the way industry has responded and the way organizations have responded to this is simply by making organization structures flatter. And the assumption in that is that we have fewer people that have a higher level of expertise that are going to be able to deliver the result, because every time something new comes up, there are fewer levels to go to, and there are fewer people who have to sit up and make the difference. So organizations are responding in many different ways. There is frequent downsizing for a variety of reasons. Obviously, we all know the reasons. Some of them are economic, and some of them are just the emergence of technology that can take the role that a human being was performing earlier. There again, all of a sudden, from a deep hierarchical, people-oriented business, you become a shallow. I shouldn't say shallow, but not a deep or flat, flat and downsized decision-making engine. It requires a different set of skills, and it's a big change from the style that people have been managing in the past. We talked about the rapid rate of change. Even these things change so quickly. Just organization structures and downsizing, and things in the market, customer demands, everything just changes so quickly that the need for people to be independent thinkers and be able to respond to that is a crying need today. A lot of people don't do it, and that's the reason why you see, there's always a set of people in an organization that are stable and are performing, and there is a floating population that comes out and goes out as quickly as they came as quickly as they came in. These are the ones who are not connected with what results they're trying to drive. They don't feel empowered. They don't feel emotionally attached to what they're trying to do, and they haven't been given the empowerment or the space to be able to do that. It happens in the best of companies. One of the big areas that we're beginning to see now is what we call federated learning. Learning systems in the past have largely been obviously driven by the way society is structured, and society has been structured in many ways by the way either their social structures exist or the way that their professional structures exist. And I'm going to focus on the professional structures. We came through, from man being the hunter and gatherer to moving to being a farmer and then moving to the industrial age. In the industrial age, everything was hierarchical and top-driven. It was almost as simple as, you had the bell curve, is that every human being is, the productivity of every human being has to be the same, because after all, they use a machine that has the same level of production. So if one human being produces more than the other, he is better than the other. And therefore he moved up in the hierarchy, and you had the pyramid structure that came up. But if you think about, and similarly, the education system also worked like that. It was very pedagogic. When a teacher said something, the teacher was right. You learned that stuff, and you did what they said, because they were more learned. It was also like that in family structures. If the patriarch said something, that was the final word, and everybody had to follow whether they agreed or they didn't. But in the last few years, especially with the emergence of the internet, and more lately with the emergence of the telecom networks and so on, and in turn their access to the internet, the model of learning has changed completely. It's not, children today, and in fact not just children, even professionals today are learning more from unstructured and widespread sources of information than they're learning, say, at school, or in their companies. So it's not really coming down from a single authoritative point. It's coming from multiple points, and that's and that's what we call federated learning. So knowledge exists in lots of places, and you have access to it through a certain point. That's one way of learning. The other way is you go to school, where the teacher is the fountainhead of the knowledge, and they impart knowledge from the top downwards. So when you're learning more bottoms up as compared with what you're learning top down, it's very difficult for you to be managed top down. You'll want to work in an environment that works bottoms up. It's a very significant social disruption in the workplace, and this is one of the reasons why we need to start looking at new ways of managing people around us. The large momentum, I would say, or rather the main momentum in the thinking is about people who are trying to look at ways in which their career paths, their learning path, their contribution, their success is not is not within the framework of something that exists, but is something that they can design by themselves and on their own. And that's the reason you find so many people going into alternate careers or into startups and so on. They just have more control, or they feel they have more control in those environments than they do in traditional, pyramidal organizational structures. And therefore, at the end of the day, managers have to, have to look at creating that level of accountability by their staff, who are largely living in what we're increasingly seeing as an entitlement culture. I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. My accountability can always take a backseat as long as I'm getting my entitlements. So, we're looking at a variety of reasons why we should be looking at alternate modes of coaching. But let's first understand what the coaching style is. These are, it's not a one-off kind of a conversation. The whole idea behind coaching is, how do you have a one-to-one engagement with people that's ongoing, which is an ongoing dialogue, and that's something that's purposeful from the point of view of not just the manager as the coach, but also the employee as the coachee. So one of the properties of coaching is that it's a one-on-one ongoing dialogue. It's obviously between the manager, who's the coach, and the line employee, who's the coachee, and I'll be using these terms throughout the presentation. Yeah. The objective here isn't correction. The objective isn't so much looking back and saying you should have, or you could have, or you did not. It's more about looking forward and saying, how do we enhance the potential of an individual? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should not review, or that we should not point out what's right or what's wrong. But there is a way to do it, and it's less of the statement of fact about something that somebody doesn't do or doesn't do enough of, as it is of saying what could be a better result. And that's that's the change in style that one will look at. It certainly does differ from a performance assessment in that sense. And it focuses instead on on a few things, like how do we motivate, how do we get people to do more, how do we get the best out of the people that we have, because the human capital we have in organizations today, unfortunately, by our own definitions, without realizing it, we tend to maximize the use of, or we tend to maximize the human potential in the organization to the extent of about 20%. And here's what I'm saying. Here's why I'm saying this. If you look at a bell curve, you say you have 100 people in an organization, in a team, or whatever. If you look at the bell curve, and you look at the performance distribution of people, let's say you look at a perfect distribution. In a perfect distribution, you'll have 20% top performers, you'll have 20% bottom performers, you'll have 60% in the middle. The ones at the top are actually giving you the best results. The ones in the middle are, well, sort of ho-hum. They're doing what they have to, they're delivering what they have to deliver, and they're not the stars, so to say. And then there's 20% that that are at the bottom of the pile, and everybody says there's really no point working on them, because you're not going to get much out of that lot. Therefore, where do you focus your best energies? Whether you are a line manager, or you're an HR person, or you're the management of the organization, you focus your energy on the top 20%. These are the same top 20% who are giving you the best results anyway, right? So what about the 80% of human capital that's sitting around in the organization, that's either giving you mediocre performance or absolutely useless performance? And that's the reason why a lot of the conversations that we encourage in organizations are with the 60%, because these are the guys that you can move. Even if you can move half of them towards the top 20%, the results are going to be much better than if you just move the top 20% a little more. And you can prove this empirically. It's actually a fairly simple thing to prove. The way to work with those guys is exactly this: to motivate and encourage them, and then to guide the coachee to whatever is their excellence. Because let's be clear about it: one style doesn't fit all. One style of management doesn't work for everybody. If you have 10 people in a room, your style may work for 2 or 3 people. It may work on, on an average for, or at an average level for another 5 or 6 people, and it just doesn't work for a few people. Does that mean that, does that mean that the only smart people in the room are the 2 or 3 who sort of gel with your style of management? It doesn't necessarily mean that at all. And I think that's the important part. There are a lot of people in that room who are thinking about these kind of things. Is there someone who's encouraging my development? Why is it that there's only 3 or 4 people who get the maximum attention of my management? Or this is a common question you hear as well. Um, have I really got the opportunities to learn and grow? It just seems like all the fantastic things that come along, all the big projects that come along, go to a few people in the system, and the rest of us are just sitting here and doing the grunt work. Or for that matter, it gets more direct. Does my manager seem to care about me? Do I even matter in this whole system? Now, we don't do this because we want to be bad managers. We just do it because we don't have, we don't know another way to do it. And I think that's the crux of the matter. Because if you look at the number one reason for attrition in organizations, this unfortunately only gets discussed in exit interviews. It often doesn't make it to reports. But the number one reason people leave is not the organization or their job description. The number one reason people leave is because they don't get on with their supervisor. Right? And that's also, by the way, the number one reason why they don't put their best effort into their work. It's a very simple thing. If I'm not emotionally connected to what I'm doing, if there's no connection, there's no commitment. If there's no commitment, I don't do, there's no accountability. If there's no accountability, I will do what I'm told. I will not stretch one little finger, to do anything extra. So it becomes a big challenge, and we often get very frustrated, and it's very difficult to figure out what exactly is the reason that that we have so many employees in an organization that are disconnected and that are that are disinterested in the kind of work that's going on. Now, how do you do this, right? It's your engagement with an employee could be a number of things. There are really 4 things. The first is they're always looking at how you're thinking. So it's the quality of the thinking that's always something that people are looking at. The second is how are you acting? Do they appear to see you as a person that they can connect with, or do they see you as a person who's who's distanced and far removed and not approachable, and they can't get meetings with you on a regular basis. You're often too busy or whatever it is. The third is what you say, and I'm going to focus really on what what. So look, thinking and acting is one thing, but saying is eventually what what it boils down to when you're having an interaction with people in the team. The fourth, of course, is how you look, and we are not going to focus on that too much today. Today we'll just focus on one of those boxes, which is how are you conversing with these people. Right? A lot of people in the middle of the organization, and almost everybody at the bottom of the organization clearly has a view about how they want to be managed, and it's not top down. And so one of the things that we need to acknowledge as managers to ourselves, or manager as a coach to ourselves, is this: it's always going to be the agenda of the coachee, and the coachee in this case is the team member. Now this is a bit like looking at the whole issue upside down. It's very well for me to sit here on the webinar and say it's the coachee's agenda. But what if the coachee's agenda is, is to party all day long, while the agenda of the business is to generate revenue, or to, create more products, or reduce costs, or whatever the agenda of the organization is. So how do you manage that? How do you bring those things together? But let's be patient about it. It is in the coaching model. It is the coach's agenda, and only the coachee can tell us what that agenda is. So there's little point in trying to second guess a person who has an agenda. The first thing that needs to be done is to clearly understand what the agenda is, and what is the motivation behind it. It's only after we understand clearly what the coach is looking for is to guide the coachee to do a few things. And I think it's this is where you start bringing the two things together. It's about what's the coach's agenda. That's fine, but how does the coach work and guide the coachee to the following things to align with what's the overall organizational or team objective, to be committed to what the team objective or the organizational objective is, to engage with the work that's at hand. How do you get them to really have some kind of an emotional connection or some kind of a responsibility or accountability they feel towards the result, to synergize with other people in achieving that result, because you cannot achieve it by yourself, and finally to be accountable to the result. Now this is interesting. How do you do it? And I think one way to do this is that before we get into discussing a coach's agenda, it's probably a good idea to set a context. As for a manager to play a good role as a coach, it's fine to give direction, because at the end of the day, you're not working at odds with each other. You're not working at cross purposes. You all need to get to a certain point. But while giving the direction, it's equally important to not communicate that direction as a directive, because directive is an order: do this or do that. A direction is, this is where we want to generally head, right? Which leaves the scope open to have that conversation, to figure out with the coachee exactly how he would like to contribute towards that objective, how he would like to measure that contribution in the context of his role. And therefore you give the control of what the coachee wants to contribute to the success of the business into the coachee's hands, while at the same time you position yourself as an accountability partner, and therefore you retain with yourself the ability and the right to be able to question that. But you do it in a way where, if you question it, you don't then go out there and say, no, I question this, I don't believe that what you're saying is right, therefore go and do this. A much better approach with this kind of a workforce, with this kind of a mindset, is, I don't agree with what you're saying because ABC, and have the discussion if need be, but I'd like you to go back to think what you think would be an alternate way to achieve this objective. Because remember, what are these people looking at? They're looking at concrete contribution. They're looking at participation. They're looking at understanding how they are part of the success of the organization. And they're definitely not interested in being told what to do or how to do it. So now, here's the bottom line. They may not necessarily have their way all the time, because at the end of the day, the organization is driving towards a particular result. But they have to absolutely have their say in what needs to be done. So I think that if we look at that, if we keep that in perspective, they may not have their way, but they could have their say. They should have their say. I think we'd be we'd have a pretty good guideline to take the conversation forward on. Now, it's not so much about these questions that I put on this slide. They're just indicative. The question could pertain to whatever is the conversation that you're having with an individual at a particular time. But you notice that they're direct enough, yet they are fairly open-ended, because they're not suggested. So, for instance, instead of so let's look at a few of them. Asking somebody what are the risks of success is a much better way of getting a perspective from them and of their own understanding of what the risks might be, than to have somebody come in with an idea and you telling them, yeah, this idea is fine, but let me tell you why it will fail. The risks are as follows: 1, 2, and 3. You just killed all the enthusiasm in the room. right? Um, let's take another one. What are you ready to commit to? It's somewhere down the line. I mean, what are you ready to commit to is a great way of asking somebody to say exactly what they're doing or what they are going to do uh, to achieve the goal that they've set out to do, as opposed to saying you need to do this, this, and this. Now, that you need to do this, this, and this first has a few limitations. The first is the success or failure of whatever you tell somebody to do. The accountability of that sits on your shoulder, not on the shoulder of the person who's going to do it. Because if it doesn't work, they're just going to come back to you and say, well, you said ABC and it doesn't work, right? The second thing is that there is no ownership that's felt by the person who's being told what they need to do. And therefore, you're losing out significantly on an opportunity of leveraging that energy to the benefit of the individual and to the benefit of the company. So, what are you ready to commit to could lead to a set of things that somebody says to you, which you understand and believe will not lead to the result. It's perfectly all right to say, do you think this effort is at the right level to be able to achieve the goal? And ask questions that follow, saying, why do you believe that this level of effort is going to lead to this result, or what is, what's different from what we were doing in the past? Or you could do, use some of these questions that are out here. For instance, what's the dialogue you really need to have but haven't had so far? Is there something that's that you're holding back that you haven't had a discussion with me about or somebody else about? Bring it out in the open. Let's clear that and see if the result we're driving towards will be achieved or not. So you're driving, so in addition to driving accountability, alignment, commitment, all of those things that we discussed in the slide before this, you'll end up creating another very important thing, and I want to talk about it because we don't do enough. We don't do enough of that. We don't do enough of that in management these days, and that is about creating a thinking organization. There are far too many organizations where people down the line are just sitting there waiting for their manager to tell them what needs to be done. And the reason they sit there is because that's how it has always happened. And then something changes, and either the manager changes or some of the people are taken out of the team or the priority for the business changes, and nobody really knows what needs to be done. And there is no skill in the system that has been built over a period of time for people to pick up an issue, ask the right questions, problem solve for it, and then go and do it themselves. So we have leaders, and then we have just a set of people who follow instructions. There's there's not much conversation that happens over a period of time for them to develop those kind of skills. That's why we say so here's a model that could be used to do that. Of course, we had the questions that we looked at on the previous file, but it's really a four-step. It's really a four-step thing to help people grow in their own roles. G obviously is the goal, which is the direction setting that we spoke about, right? R is for reality, which is about looking at the current situation, and that's where that foil with all the questions comes up, right? Is this the right level of effort? What is it that you need to discuss that you haven't discussed so far? How much worse does it have to get before it'll get better? Questions of that kind. And then questions that explore new ideas. What are the options that we have to what are the options that we have to achieve that goal? For instance, questions that would ask, so what do you believe are the 2 or 3 main levers out of the 10 things that we do that are likely to produce 80% of the result? That's what's the one thing that you think we should do that if we didn't do, then anything else we do really doesn't matter that much? Force people to think through what the options are, and that's that level of thinking and that level of contribution to to how success is going to be achieved will create the will, the desire to create a plan that's going to lead you to that success. So we are looking or we are talking about creating quiet leaders in the system. These are not the ones who jump around on stage and pump their fist in the air and make big and bold, over the top kind of statements. These are the people who sit back and actually develop their teams and their organizations to create a great deal of thinking capability in addition to the execution that they already do. It's going to help create deep management talent. And you might find your next level of managers coming from not necessarily the next level in the hierarchy, but from anywhere in the organization. It's a great way to say the top 20% are good. We need to invest in them. That's great. But what about the middle 60%? In the first foil, I talked about taking the net promoter score of an organization from 15 to 57. Now you cannot possibly say, I want to increase our net promoter score from customers the way the customers rank us. Here is a check of 5 crore rupees. Please spend this money, and we are going to somehow going to be able to achieve that goal. It doesn't work that way. It's only going to work if people are committed to what needs to be done. And that means that you've got to have the bulk of the organization following it. So here's a simple thing that we said. That organization has about 15,000 people in the country. And we said, okay, so what's 20% of 15,000? That's 3,000. That's your top 3,000 people. They have done a good job. They are doing a good job. They always will do a good job. There's 20% at the bottom. That's 3,000 people, right? So you take 6,000 out of 15,000, you're left with 9,000 people. What if every one of your top 20% people and every one of your middle 60% people performed one activity per week? This is not changing their lives. It's just one activity per week. If every one of these people performed one activity per week that was targeted at specifically improving your customers' experience with your company, how many activities would that be every week? So the answer to that is 12,000 activities per week. How many weeks in a year are there? 52. What's 52 times 12,000? Well, it's over 500,000, right? So if 500,000 activities were performed, how many would that be, per customer? And they looked at, they have about 20,000 customers in the country. So if you divide 500,000 by 20,000, you get 25. That means 25 activities per customer per annum would be performed by this company that would improve the experience of those customers in doing business with this company. Would that move the needle or not? And the resounding answer to that was, it absolutely will. And so, I think this whole approach of looking back at what's the performance and then determining who's good, who's not, and having those kinds of conversations is probably not such a big changer of performance of an organization as it would be if you leverage the human capital that's at your behest, and that's typically the top 20 and the middle 60%. It's going to improve ownership and accountability, and that's our bet. The reason we say that is because if people have more of a stake, if people have more of a say in what they are going to do and how they are going to do it to achieve their results, it just simply means they just take a much higher level of accountability for those things. And at the end of the day, for the manager of a team or for the organization, it basically means that not only are you addressing the requirements of today's workforce by having these kind of conversations, but it has a very tangible and very direct impact in creating a scalable model or a scalable management model for the business. Let's quickly take a look at why is it important to make the transition. And I don't want to spend a lot more time on this. I just wanted to talk about the kind of impact that this could have. Think of this this as it's actually a chart. So think of this axis as moving from left to right. In other words, the further right you go, the more empowerment and engagement you're creating. Right? And then think of this as moving from bottom to top. The further up you go, the higher the results. Our experience and our what our work has taught us is that the higher the level of empowerment and engagement that people have given to their teams, the higher has been the level of results that those teams have achieved. We honestly believe, that manager coaches will lead the charge towards much greater level of empowerment and productivity for employees than if we were to indulge in a lot of command and control. I'm just putting a positive spin on that, on this story. The converse is equally true, because the further left you go on this empowerment and engagement axis, it means the more and more command and control you're exercising. So the more command and control you exercise, the lesser is the impact on the business. And so, you just look at the play that's available to every manager. The play is available from this range of empowerment and engagement, which is virtually 0, to this range of empowerment and engagement, which is 100. I don't think anybody is ever going to get to this point, because you will have times at which you'll have to employ empowerment and you'll have to employ command and control, especially at times when people are new in the system or they're thoroughly indisciplined. But the point is, even if we get to this point, even if we get to 70% of empowerment and engagement, as opposed to say 30%, you can see an almost proportional change in the level of output that people can create. And that's the reason we believe that that manager as a coach is a very powerful way to engage your people, and is a very important skill for managers to learn, in addition to, of course, the domain skills and some of the other skills that we've acquired over a period of time. It's an add-on. It's an additional skill. It's not it's not a skill that we need to completely transition to, because some of the skills that we've acquired are fairly relevant in many of the areas that we operate in. But it's just that this is an additional skill that could get the most out of people. I want to give you an example of how we use this at an organization-wide level. We worked with a large insurance company at one time, and not with all the people in the company, but with the agency operation. And agency operation is the part where they have their own agents who sell their policies, as opposed to banks or financial institutions. So it was with the agency operation. They had operations in, I think, obviously all across the country, but they had split that up into 12 zones. So we did this work with about 6 or 7 zones, if I remember correctly, covering an overall maybe about 1,800 agents. And if my estimates are right, probably about 400 to 500 managers. And by using these techniques, one of the things that we said was, let's look at a business result. But the other thing we said was, let's also look at what's the impact on behavior. Now, that's usually a hard thing to measure, but one of the things that I do want to share with you is that their HR director, the vice president of HR, who was running the entire HR for the company, came back to us after about 6 or 7 months and said, in 6 months, we've been able to achieve, by using this kind of a system, we've been able to achieve something that we've been trying to do for the last 3 years, and we hadn't succeeded. And we asked, what is it? He said, everyone's speaking the same language. And because everyone's speaking the same language and using the same terminology and the same words, there is an energy that's got created in the organization that's created a very healthy competition. And now everybody wants to go and deliver against against the objectives that they've taken up, because they would like to have that conversation with their peers. And so that was a very significant outcome of using a model at an organizational level, by coaching a bunch of people and then using and then leveraging coaching community inside the organization to further coach, basically like a hub and spoke model. So it's, it shows some very significant results. My content was up to this point. I just like to encourage now, any questions that you might have to, to be able to take the conversation forward.